Hi, I'm Richa and welcome to Fremont Debate Academy. Today, we're talking about what are counterplans and a new option for the opposition. So, as usual, I found a key picture online, and honestly, I don't know what the little boy is doing, but apparently, he's arguing a counterplan in a debate, and it's working. And so this is important for today's topic because counterplans are a little bit more advanced. It's no longer a basic MS-PDP format that we're covering. And so I want to urge you to kind of understand the material and then use it. If you go into debate and you get opposition, maybe think about using a counterplan because you never know, it might work. So let's get on with the video. What is a counterplan? Counterplans are an effective strategy for the opposition in a debate round. So let's break this up. What does a counterplan do? It's a way for the opposition to come up with a better plan than the proposition. So the counterplan, or CP, so if you go online and you search it up, you will find a lot of times they abbreviate counterplan to CP. So don't get alarmed if you see CP, it just means counterplan. The counterplan will try to provide better impacts and arguments than the original plan. And it's a way to tell the judge that you are solving the problem in a better way than the proposition. So here's an example to try and make this more clear. Let's say we have the topic, the United States federal government should invest in wind energy. In a normal debate, the proposition would agree and say the United States federal government should invest in wind energy, and the opposition would disagree and say the United States federal government should not invest in wind energy. But in a debate where you're using a counterplan, the proposition would still agree and the opposition would still disagree and say the United States federal government should not invest in wind energy, but they will also say the United States federal government should invest in solar energy. So they're kind of adding on to what they would have originally said by saying, look, here's a better solution to the one that we have right now. And so this is why we shouldn't use the current solution. We should use this new solution. So you really want to argue why the new solution is completely better than the old solution, and you shouldn't even invest in wind energy at all. So when should you use counterplans? You can only use a counterplan in a policy round or a policy debate. And a policy debate is where there is an actor doing something. So the most common actor you're going to get is the USFG, which is the United States federal government. And so if we go back to our example, the topic was United States federal government should invest in wind energy, right? So the actor is the United States federal government and the action is that they should invest. And so it's topics like these when you can really use counterplans. Of course, there are other actors that you could get, but the United States federal government is a really common one. So it's not the only one, so just keep that in mind. You can also use it when there's no way to prove that the proposition's entire plan is bad, right? So sometimes in a debate topic, each side has its pros and cons, and maybe the proposition has a really strong case, and because you've prepped for it. And because of this, you could use a counterplan as an opposition to kind of make your side better and stronger to hopefully win over the proposition side. And you can also use it to create impacts that the proposition can't. So again, to kind of strengthen your side over the propositions. Okay, so we've talked about what a counterplan is. So let's talk a little bit about how to present a counterplan. So how do you introduce a counterplan in a round? So you want to introduce a counterplan at the beginning of the first opposition speech. So it should be about 20 to 30 seconds of explanation, depending on your judge's understanding of the topic or of what a counterplan is. And if they don't have much experience, you want to spend enough time explaining what a counterplan is and how the opposition can use it, right? And so if we go back to our example, we say that the United States federal government should invest in wind energy. But as the opposition, if you suddenly start talking and your contentions are about the United States federal government should invest in solar energy, a judge who doesn't understand a counterplan might not understand what you're saying. They're like, why are they talking about solar energy when they should be talking about wind energy? Or it might not be clear enough to the judge that you're making a counter argument or counter plan. So you just want to make sure that you're really clear and explain what you're going to do. And then after you explain, say, therefore, the opposition's counter plan is. And the reason that you have to give it in the first opposition speech is because you want to give the proposition at least one constructive speech to respond, right? So you're bringing up something completely new. So you should give the proposition, you need to give the proposition the chance to also bring up new evidence to defend their case and maybe bring down or de-strengthen your case. So presenting a counterplan continued. So all of your refutations should be cross-applied, should be a cross-application of the counterplan. So this means that you shouldn't always say as a refute to the proposition's points, our counterplan is better. You can't, that's not good enough, right? You shouldn't only be saying our impacts are better than theirs, or solar energy is better than wind energy, and that's why we're better. You need to give examples. And so what this means is that you should still include arguments of why the proposition's plan has detriments as well, right? So you don't want to say my impacts are better, but they also have good points. You want to say no. Their plan is bad and our plan is good and better, right? And so that's why you need to also include in your refutes evidence for why their points are bad, right? So in an original debate, you would have said why wind energy should not be invested, or why the United States government should not invest in wind energy or wind power. And you would have said, here are the flaws when you're doing wind power. And so you want to use those in your refutes. And then you should present your contentions that support your counterplan uniquely. So what this means is your contentions should support your counterplan, right? Your contentions should say, this is why solar power is really good and it's better than wind energy, so we shouldn't even do wind energy. Forget about wind energy. We're going to do solar energy. And so I found another picture online, and it says you can't just walk into a round and run an unprepared counterplan, right? So just like in the previous slide, I said your contentions need to support your counterplan, right? So you can't just hear the first proposition speech and then think, okay, I'm going to run a counterplan and go up and give a counterplan. You need to have evidence. All your contentions need to support your counterplan. So it's something that you have to pre-prepare. So if you know you want to try counterplan because you have a policy round, definitely try and then see if you want to use it. So make sure you're pre-preparing your counterplan if you're going to use it. So now that we've covered that, we're going to go on to the types of counterplans. So we're going to introduce the plan-inclusive counterplan. It's a tongue twister. So let's go over what a normal counterplan is. It's something completely different from the proposition's plan. It solves the same problem but with a different approach, and it doesn't necessarily have the same impacts as the proposition's impacts. So to put this all together, it's the same example I've been giving you this whole presentation. It's that wind energy is completely different from solar energy, right? So they're different and it's the same problem, right? You're finding a better way to produce energy, but different approaches, wind versus solar. And it doesn't necessarily have to have the same impacts because, again, they're different solutions. So different, wind energy might have different benefits than solar energy does. Okay, so now let's move on to the plan-inclusive counterplans. So how it works is you take the proposition's plan, you take out the bad things from it, and then you have your counterplan. So it solves the problem with the same approach, except with adjustments. So it still needs to have differences from the proposition's plan. So this is why I like to think it's a little bit more complicated. You have to be careful that you have enough differences because you don't want the proposition to say, oh, you're supporting our side. but the good thing is that you will be able to have parts of the impacts from the proposition side because you're using part of their plan. And so an example of how this works is if the topic is the United States federal government will legalize all drugs, the proposition would agree. And the opposition would say the United States federal government will legalize all drugs except crocodile. Gosh, that sounds like crocodile. I really hope I'm not mispronouncing it. But that's how the plan inclusive counterplans work. And so this is viable because if you're not legalizing crocodile, then you're technically not legalizing all drugs. So the opposition is still opposing or going against what the proposition is saying because they're disagreeing with legalizing all drugs because they're not legalizing one of them. And so they're giving a better solution, but they're still saying we're going to legalize most drugs. So they're going to be able to use a lot of the same impacts as proposition, but then they can add on to it by saying, look, we're not legalizing crocodile because of X, Y, and Z reasons, and these impacts are even more beneficial, and that's a detriment to the proposition's plan. So our side is so much better. Lastly, so now that we've talked a lot about how to give a counterplan and the different types, we're going to talk about how to refute counterplans. So how do you take down the opposition's counterplan? So what do you need to do? You need to prove that your solution is the best way to get a better world. You want to prove that your opponents aren't solving efficiently for the issue, right? So you have a more efficient way to solve the problem. And so you want to say the opposition's counterplan does more net harm than good. So there's more bad things with the new counterplan than there is with the original plan. And you want to make sure that you emphasize that your methods are more effective and efficient. So your side or your plan should be taken, or it should be the one that the judge votes for. And so in a nutshell, what you need to do is you need to prove your impacts are better. And we have a whole other video. It's called The Importance of the Third Speech, and it's going to tell you exactly how to break it down and how to explain how your impacts are better. And it'll exactly help you do these points about showing how your methods might be more effective or efficient, or the opposition side does more harm than it does good. So thank you so much for watching our video. Like and subscribe for more content.